Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unlimited Seating, featuring candid conversations with female role models in the workplace. Today, I have as my guest Balkiz Sarihan. Balkiz is the head of urban air mobility partnerships and strategy execution at Airbus and is based in France. Balkiz has been the head of business ambition and strategic innovation at Airbus Helicopters since 2017, and she has over 18 years of experience in the aerospace and defense sector. Balkis, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us at Unlimited Seating today.
Sanila, it's a great pleasure. And thank you for this really wonderful and honest and open, candid initiative. It's really inspirational. So thank you to you, really.
It's because I have awesome guests like you who are ready to sign on and share their experience. And I'm learning so much. I've wanted to have you on Unlimited Seating since the first time we met at the Dubai Air Show last year, right? And as I look into your career and the profile on LinkedIn, you have huge experience in aerospace and defense. So I'm going to start with what brought you into this sector. Was it something you wanted to do since childhood? How did you develop this interest for the sector?
It's a really good question. And, it's actually a very, very happy and fortunate accident. It was by complete chance, as many of the wonderful things that come upon us in life are. So it was fresh out of university, looking at career options as we all do and thinking, okay, what do I want to do with my life? And thinking, of a certain path, and aerospace came completely unexpected. And I started. And to be honest, I haven't looked back. So it has been absolutely fortunate. I've had wonderful experiences both internationally and through different elements of the aerospace chain, from very much customer facing to kind of the internal, and then OEM, and now being part of this brilliant UAM adventure, building what will be next in aerospace and next in mobility. So I've been very, very fortunate and very grateful to have had and continue to have this incredible journey, really.
Okay, and growing up then, Balkis, who are your role models growing up? Tell us a bit more.
I think if I look back and the types of jobs and choices that I've made, honestly, my biggest role model is my mother. In fact, she, by career, has also chosen a very different path, not a very traditional path. I'm Turkish by origin, born in Istanbul, and my mother grew up in a very small village, and then forged her way into something that was completely unexpected of her, of that generation, of that time, and where she was, and has been in the business field throughout. When my family moved to Canada when I was 7 years old, so I've had a very fortunate upbringing of kind of dual nationalities and dual parts of the mind and dual cultures. We always retained this with us as well. And she, from that point on, has been absolutely a serial entrepreneur. From setting up small businesses and now continuing to run a family business that's now taken over by my sister. So this idea of building something, taking the path less traveled, all of this, I think, has been intrinsic in me from a very, very early start, and the passion to create and to build. So I think I've always looked for this, to do something that is a little bit different, maybe a little bit unexpected, and always be on the forefront of building and creating. So I have to say, it's definitely due to my mom, in fact.
Okay. I wanted to explore a bit more of that building and creating, especially in your current role, maybe over the last few years at Airbus. I want to go back to the start of your career. You've evolved, right? It started with I think it was more of an operational role. It was a big role. It was operational, probably a bit more predictable kind of work. And I see as you've evolved, you went to Vector Aerospace. There was a lot of acquisition work involved, restructuring, a lot of strategy, and the strategic nature of your role has only grown since then. So, can you walk us a bit into, hey, how was it starting out in a sector that you probably had to get in and learn? But then what was it that helped you grow from the size of the role, but also the nature of the role? Can you walk us through some of that experience, please?
Absolutely, happy to. I think in the aerospace field, I mean, traditionally it's a very technical field, it's a very engineering focused field, and I'm not an engineer by trade. So I always say I've done anything and everything there is to do in aerospace except engineering, and that's probably, a good thing. So I'm not somebody who is naturally, should have been in aerospace. So I've taken on roles, I think that is very much, startup roles, then focusing on operations and learning a lot. So my first jobs are almost always in kind of supporting functions. And in these supporting functions, it's always been a bit building the bridge between what is happening on the technical side and what is happening either with the rest of the organization, if it's an internally focused role, or what I've really enjoyed most is really externally focused, taking what's happening within an organization and translating that into what's happening, to our customers or to our market, or I think this is where I started to gravitate towards strategy type roles, where it's really translating what's happening external to the world and how we can use that to grow the business, or the opportunities and the challenges that are within the business, and how do we make that understandable and relatable to our customers, our partners, and all of this. And if I, hear some of this, you can listen to yourself as you're talking about it right now. That's probably what led me a lot to, what I'm doing now in UAM. But I think we'll come to that in a little bit. Um, but we've also done within the aerospace chain, I started off working for an operator. So very, very early on, you realize the importance of aerospace, the importance of what we're really doing. So we are, building and supporting machines that are moving people and goods in very, very critical situations. So this customer service and always availability and responsiveness and responsibility, I think, is intrinsic in what we do. And then when we think about, what that means in terms of how we deal and the decisions that we make, I think there is some sort of humility that is carried with us all along. And it doesn't really matter which part of the aerospace adventure or the aerospace supply chain that you're in. It really is at the heart of it a very critical service that we're providing. So there's a lot of passion that comes with it as well.
As you grew, Balkis, were these conscious decisions you made on like, hey, this is what I want to do next? I've done the acquisition now. I've kind of done some restructuring. What do I need to do next? Were these conscious moves that you made in your career, or did they happen because, hey, Balkis has done great in this role. I want you to go and do this next. Was it more suggestion from people who worked with you?
Mm. This is an interesting discussion point because sometimes we are pulled and sometimes we push. And if I look back on the major shifts in my career, and it's not always an upward shift, it's just sometimes to do something different and to learn something different. So the greatest things have sometimes come from a realization that at some point you become almost too comfortable in what you're doing. And for me, I start to get this little nagging feeling inside to say, okay, there should be something more. There's something more to learn. There's something more to do. And sometimes, honestly, I don't know what that more is, but it starts off with this feeling and then this wondering. And then I think as soon as you start having this internal wondering, and then it causes you to have conversations. And once you start having these conversations with people around you, whether they're colleagues, whether they're mentors, whether, advisors that we collect throughout our lives and we keep very precious to us, then suddenly it starts to trigger into different opportunities. And then, either you see what the opportunity exactly is, or sometimes it's something completely different and you're pulled into something. So, and quite often this has also come with moves as well. So, I've grown up in Vancouver, Canada, spent most of my early years, both professionally and personally, in Vancouver. And one of the biggest moves that I made actually was, when Vector was formed and I moved to Toronto. And this was quite unexpected. It was just something that was presented at a time when I had this, this nagging feeling that I should be doing something more and doing something different. So, but here it was somebody, who I trusted and who presented something. And we said, at the family, why not? Why not to make this move? Why not to make this change? And I think there's something that happens also when we're given this opportunity, both for a new career and very, very fortunately, a new working environment. You know, So suddenly everything is in turmoil, suddenly everything is chaotic, everything is being set up fresh. But it really allows you to think, okay, what do I want to do with this? What do I want to do about not only a new city to live in, a new city to build a life in, but also a completely new career to which sometimes we all honestly feel, right? Am I really ready for such a step? Am I really willing and able? And do I have everything that I need to be able to make such a move? The answer is no. And if the answer is no, do it anyways.
Yes, yeah.
If it scares us, do it anyways, whether it's a move, whether it's a career change. I mean, within reason, if you're fortunate enough to have the supporting network to be able to do it, I think the best moves that I've ever made are the ones that have scared me a little bit, you know, and it's always good. It just forces you to grow, I think, out of your comfort zone. So this is what's been the big triggers, and it's been the same. So then, a few years later, I was very fortunate to be offered a job at Airbus, to go from kind of the external side of it, customer facing, to see what's really happening in the OEM side of it with such a wonderful, incredible, large global organization like Airbus, and to have the responsibility of not only designing, building, certifying, and then the whole element of safely putting into service the beautiful machines that we work on. I think you can tell I'm a bit of a aerospace geek at this stage. I'm a bit in love with the sector, but all of this comes is a great part of the adventure. I think so. And it's been 6 years, and 6 years since we made the move again with the family to something completely different, a different country, a different part of the world, a different adventure, and it's been great. These big leaps of faith and opportunity. I I think we should all take them.
Okay, I'm gonna. You've obviously delivered in every role you've been, which is why you've gotten the next step, like you said, whether it's not a step up, but a chance to do something different and potentially something bigger. Can I ask you something about communicating about your successes and achievements, right? How important has that been for you in your growth as you looked to new opportunities? And you come across as somebody very humble, and you said so at the start, right? I can make it out in our interactions. Has it been has it been a norm that you've had to go and proactively say, hey, I've done this, I've delivered on this, so what's next for me? And did you find that a challenge? Did you have to do it at all? Did you consciously do it, and did you have to make an effort to do it?
I think first of all, you have to do it. And some people are naturally very, very good at doing it. And it's a skill set that I admire. And honestly, it's not something that is natural to me. So it's something that you have to practice. I think we become very good at telling other people's story, but perhaps less good at telling our own story. And when I've struggled like this, I actually turn to other people, and ask them, okay, so I need to tell my story, and whether it's writing new CV or writing a bio and things like that. And it's not the easiest thing to kind of go and say, okay, it feels a bit like, yay me, look at me. And it's not something that's I'm naturally kind of a reserved person, so it's not something that comes naturally to me. But we have to do it. So, and I turn to others to help me do it, really. So, and even as we are talking, and we were talking about what to say in this interview and questions like that, it's always interesting to hear from other people's perspectives to say, okay, yeah, that is something interesting. That is an interesting experience I've had, whether that is an experience of success or whether it's an experience where it hasn't been successful and you think, oh, wow, there's a lot to learn from this experience. All that is part of what the journey is. And, we have to be able to tell that story. So for ourselves and for the people that we interact with. And sometimes I found the easiest ways to start to tell our story is, in these very important mentorship and advisory type of relationships. So, because when we're entering into these types of relationships, and we all have, whether we are the mentor or the mentee, it's actually a very reciprocal type of interaction. We are giving as much as we are taking. And sometimes when we're giving this advice or, experiencing, shared experiences, telling these types of stories, it helps us reflect as well to say, okay, this is something is what that was about, or this is what that was supposed to teach me, and this is where, I've learned a lot and I could have done it differently or better, or, whatever the learning may be. Or on the other side of it, hey, this really was a job well done. And
Yeah.
it's okay.
It's
It's
okay to
good to
say
talk about these as well. It's good to
yeah.
talk about both of them.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah, the reason I asked that is that's one of my personal missions for the year. And that's why I said the year is going so fast. I feel that I had all these great goals at the start of the year, like personal goals. And one of them was about, hey, how to tell my story better, right? And I've signed up one or two of my mentors, and I said, this is what I want to work through for the rest of the year. And I do think it's a challenge, not just for me, I think it's a challenge for many people, right? It's kind of getting stuck in that place of when I don't want to talk about, people should see what I have done, right?
mm.
But I found myself like a bit of a hypocrite because I keep coaching my team, like, hey, if you've done it, you need to talk about it. And I think as I was talking to them, I realized, okay, you're not doing this very well yourself, because I'm telling them, hey, you have a responsibility to tell other people what you've done because it might help them as well. Um,
Mm.
is to learn from your experience. So that's my personal mission for the year, to start working on telling my story really better.
And how's it going, may I ask?
Um, Not too well. I have to say that I haven't spent much time focusing on it. I keep saying, yes, next week I'm going to sit and do this, write at least 2 stories from my last experience that really helped and that I really felt I did a good job or that I really learned from. It's going slow. What I have gone and done is set up some schedule times with one of my mentors who's really amazing. So I've put those in the calendar, and I'm hoping that when I see that it's up next week, I will start working at least the week before, so I'm ready.
Well,
So setting up
I don't know about you, but I've also found, when we're talking about telling our story, um, it's also a way to find our own voice, right? It's a way to find our own voice that is authentic to us, which seems like common sense when we say it, but it doesn't always, it's not the easiest thing to start off with, I find. Because if we're trying to, emulate somebody else, it's not authentic, it's not going to come across as genuine, it's not going to come across, we're going to be uncomfortable saying it. So how to find our own voice and then our own way to tell our own story, and then it doesn't have this disconnect between, oh, I maybe I sound arrogant, or I sound this, or I sound that. No, it's my voice, it's my story, I sound like me,
Yeah,
and it's me telling it. So this is, I think, has been one of the biggest learnings for me over the
that's
many years of, practice.
that's
So
very true. That is very true. You're right. One thing that really stood out for me, and we talked about the building and the creating piece. I saw you talked about being an it's an intrapreneur, and um, I think that that's I see different themes. That is a huge part of your story. Actually, you're in this big organization, but you have multiple experiences where you kind of set up a small company within a company, right? And it kind of shows that entrepreneurial spirit, but you're leveraging, I guess, the strength of the big organization and doing this in your own style. And I think you've done this, if I remember, it's a life serve solution, I believe.
mhm.
Even now
Yeah.
with urban air mobility, did you do this consciously? I guess, what is it that drives you to kind of set up these almost like new businesses within the frame of the bigger business, right? And what is so, and does it also require a different leadership style than when you are in that big organization?
Mhm. Um, so if I tackle a few of the questions in there, so first of all, it's all these ideas come across. Again, it comes across through conversations. And it comes across with connecting with people. And I'm a big I'm a big lover of connections, for lack of a better word. I'm
Mhm.
always looking, my mind works in a way just to think about connections of people, connections of topics, connections of ideas, connections of challenges. So it's almost like I've got a constant, a Lego build, which is one of my favorite things in the world, going on in my mind at any given time. And all of these things come together because you have great people who are sharing some idea or talking about something, and also then ultimately want to take it from the talking about it to the building about it, and then the execution part of it. So it's always done with a great selection of people who are really going to fight in the trenches with you, because no matter the size of the organization, no matter also if you're doing it alone. I mean, I haven't done it, on my own, but I've seen, my mother, as I said, go through it throughout my entire life. And, you know, being an entrepreneur versus being an entrepreneur, you have to take the same level of responsibility on your shoulders and fight, with everything that you have for what you believe in. And then it will succeed and sometimes it will not. So, these ideas have sometimes succeeded and sometimes not. But this passion and this responsibility and to carry it through and to find the right people that you really 100% trust to build it with you. I think this is what makes it a success. And if I think about ideas where we've done it in very independent ways, and then ideas where it's done within the large organization, and there's two schools of thought. There's one that says, okay, build it, get as many people on board, and get as much budget and as get much sponsorship as you can, and that's what makes it a success. And perhaps this is the right way as well. And some ideas work in this way, but there's also other ideas where it's such a small idea and it's such a disruptive idea, and it's something so beyond the expectations of the organization. We have to be aware, and this is what we've lived, with Lifesaver, with the team that we're building with. And sometimes it's really good to be very, very visible and very vocal, to get the support and the resources that you need. Other times, depending on what stage you're at, you just need to go into a little bit of a quiet mode and sit back and reflect and pivot if we need to. We pivoted a lot of times because, sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, and do some internal quiet work. So it's this realization of when you need to be very externally focused and when you need to be very internally focused in these projects that are just outside of the comfort zone of what is core today. But this is also the exciting part, outside of the comfort zone, right? Outside of your own personal comfort zone and outside of the pure core business of any organization today, because this is where the growth comes from. This is where we start to test and build what could eventually be future core. So it may not be. And we also have to be really, really okay with failing.
Yeah.
Failing at the project level, failing at the personal level as well, because this is not the path of very steady, predictable, one step after another, following a process way of going. So it's, we have to be okay with this, I think, as individuals and as a project, and then as an organization supporting it as well. So
This readiness to accept failure is where I wanted to go with you. So it's really glad that that was the last line you said. Um, how are you? We talk a lot about transparency today as a leadership, how to create a culture where it's psychologically safe for employees to say that, hey, that this thing didn't work out so well, or I think there was an error made here. How do you cultivate a culture in your team where you say it's okay to fail? Has it, how did you go about telling your team that, hey, it's okay, this may work, this may not work, you're fine?
I think even in that, sometimes we're really good at it, and sometimes we're not. I think when it's a project where it is, really in the experimentation phase, you have to have that right from the beginning, right? And in particular for the people. So in if we are the leader in some way, either by form or function or just by spirit, there's a level of responsibility that we take, which is not only for the project but also for the team. So to help them, to support, but also to give a bit of, I think, cushioning and a safety net behind the scenes to say, okay, it's not only we're going to try this. If you're okay, let's go, and we do it in steps. And if we're okay to go to the next step, we go. We have a very, very clear vision of what the end game is.
Yeah, okay.
But we take it in steps, step by step by step. So if we want to continue, then we go to the next step. Right? So I think this also makes it somehow a little bit more manageable and digestible for everyone as well. And if anytime there's a person who is not ready, who's not interested, who's just needing to do something that is different, that has to be okay as well. And I think this is the responsibility of then being part of the larger organization to say, okay, then here's something else that you can do. Here's something else, a further safety net than any leader or any project can provide. I think this kind of comfort gives, hopefully, the courage to continue as well.
I like that idea of how the long-term vision is there, but you're kind of giving that comfort feeling of we're going to break it up into small pieces now. So if one piece doesn't work, we can go back and start again or pivot. So sometimes I'm thinking work is, and I don't know if you feel it, I feel almost that it's a good thing that you aren't coming from that engineering background, because you're able to see that big picture and who are the different stakeholders in that ecosystem that you need to be thinking about. I don't know if you got that. So, where you get it. I feel it's an advantage for you to have that step back.
Yeah, I think perhaps it is, and this is where we talk a lot about the magical word of diversity and inclusion, and this is what it's really about. So this is me. I am programmed in this way from a very early childhood, from my cultural, from my personality, from my education. So I'm not an engineer, so I cannot think the way our brilliant engineers do, but I hopefully provide a different perspective or a different way of thinking about it that makes the overall thing, as you said, more interesting and more adventurous and eventually more effective, right? And to have very different perspectives and personalities and experiences and styles around the table just makes everything better. It just makes everything more effective. It makes everything, more fun, more challenging. There's all these great sayings that, and I know I'm not trying to remember who said it, but I've read it many, many times that, if you're sitting in a room and everyone is, absolutely agreeing with you, then chances are you need to go find a different room.
Yeah.
Right.
True. True.
So how to, interpret that into the things that we do in our lives, maybe.
I also noticed on your profile you're a certified wrong thinker, so I went and I looked it up to see what it was. It seems it's kind of a problem-solving approach where it's just things that you talked about in terms of it's okay to accept mistakes and you pivot. But it looks like it's something you went and looked out for yourself to say, how can I get this, add to my problem-solving capability and skills? I'm going to look that up for myself as well.
Yeah, no, it's brilliant. It's a brilliant little tool, and it was one of these opportunities where I actually didn't go and find it myself, but through again one of these conversations and people that you are connecting with, who are just you're clicking with for some reason at certain points in your life, was a certified wrong thinker, and just happened that she was running a workshop when she said, "Oh, I'm doing this next week. Do you want to come?" It's just like, yeah, I really do. This is exactly what I need in this particular moment in time. So I think something happens when we're thinking about these things, and suddenly I think your mind is somehow more aware because it's on your mind. You're more aware about the opportunities and all of this that's actually surrounding us in every day. When we're very, very busy or when we're stuck, we get into this crazy tunnel vision, and sometimes you need also the right people around you to remind you, like, hey,
Right. And
big
bring you
breath, step
opportunity.
back. Yeah, you know.
Yeah. How important has feedback been in your career? Is it, did the companies you work with, did you surround yourself with people who gave you the right feedback at different points? What was the toughest feedback you think you've received, and what was your response to it?
Really good questions. Feedback essential, and feedback I think comes in different ways. And so I think as organizations, and especially as big complex organizations, we try to put a lot of resources and tools in place to give that kind of feedback, structured feedback, unstructured feedback, 360 feedback, all of this. And I think all of this is really important. And on top, I think we need to surround ourselves again with people who are advisors. Throughout my life, since the early days, I think when I've connected with people, I call it collecting your tribe, right? And collecting your tribe is not people that you work with. It's not necessarily the project team. They may be, but people who are just challenging you and pushing you in different ways. And when you meet these kinds of people, hang on to them. Hang on to them, throughout your entire life, because when I get stuck, when I'm challenged in something, when I'm frustrated in something, when I think I'm not being successful or effective in something, these are the people that I turn to. And sometimes it's a collection of different people, and you pick the ones that you start talking to. And these are the ones who start to reflect back, really, really honest and raw feedback as well. Right. I think when we use these tools that are available in our organization, we all want to be supportive. We all want to be very kind. We want to be proactive, and this is absolutely the right thing to do. And because sometimes they're also in written format, we're very careful about the words that we choose, right? Because we can't explain them, we can't give them color, we can't give them context or emotion. So this is one element of feedback. But when you have these people who really know you, who are trusted advisors, who have hopefully been part of your tribe for a really long time, these are the people who will really tell you, in an honest conversation, to say, okay, here's what you're saying, here's what I'm hearing, and then really give you the hard questions, right? That you have to then think about. Okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? So use both. Use both, but build your tribe. It's essential.
Yeah. And just getting used to that. It's okay if I receive feedback, if it's from the right people, they have your best interests in heart, and who want to see you make the right step for yourself.
Yeah, and who have also the courage to be honest with you.
Yeah.
Because honesty, real honesty, takes courage.
Yeah.
So have the courage and the interest and the dedication to you to be honest with you, because they know that when they need it, you'll be the same in return.
Sure.
So
I get the best feedback and the most direct feedback from my daughter, I have to say. Like, sometimes it's so brutal.
absolutely.
It's so brutal sometimes, but then I just take a step back and I reflect, and I'm like, oh, okay, so this is what she sees. So that's it's what I'm giving off without even realizing it.
It's very, very true. Very true. Yeah. I
um,
have the same with my daughter. She's only 4, so I can only imagine how honest and how valuable that feedback is going to be in the years to come, hopefully. So
I don't know if it's a thing about girls. It's just extremely intuitive, perceptive, and honest.
yes, yeah, and
Um,
how important and how precious it is to cultivate that
yes,
in them.
yeah.
It's incredible, incredible.
I'm very excited to hear. I would, whatever you can share about the urban air mobility project at Airbus, right? Um, if you can walk us through, hey, how are you even thinking of something that's really not big in the market today? We're talking about the market potential. It's going to be a huge industry sector, but it seems like it's a coming together of a lot that we talked about, telling your story, but also making the business case for something that's still fairly experimental and not new and not very well known of in the industry as well, Balkiz. How do you motivate your team, right? Saying that this is where you see urban air mobility, urban air vehicles going. Are there times when they feel that, oh, I don't know if this is ever going to work? I don't know if this is going to be a growth sector for us. What's your everyday, hey, come on, this is great. What is the message you tell yourself, I guess, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, how do we start with ourselves first and then the rest of it? I mean, honestly, when we think of urban air mobility and everything around it, it's a very new journey for me. So again, it's one of these absolutely, fortunate and precious and wonderful things that I get to be a part of since the past 2 years, and it ignites in me, and it was said to me when I started talking about it. When I start talking about it, I get very animated, and I get very energetic, and I get very passionate. So clearly it's triggered something in me, and if I look back on my career and things that really excite me and things that drive me, it is very much about building. So
Mhm.
the way I simply explain it is we are building something that has never been built before. And there's not a single person, there's not a single organization who knows exactly how to do it or even what it will look like. So we have everything that is being built. And what's absolutely fascinating about it is everything is being built in parallel. When we think of the technology, when we think of the applications, when we think, of course, the vehicles that we work on as well. And then when we imagine how this will be integrated into our lives, into our communities. So all of this is incredible, and all of this is unknown. And all of this is done in a very public way. When we think of new technologies as well, it is developed in a very, very public way. So there's a lot of public interest, there's a lot of public passion, there's a lot of public skepticism, there's a lot of public curiosity that goes with it. And I think anyone who's working in this space also has to have a little bit of responsibility to balance that, to keep the passion going, to keep the excitement going, to keep all of the investment and energy and great minds working on it, because only then will we actually get to a point where we can bring it to life, as we say. And all of this, I think, has to be tempered also with a bit of patience. We are testing so many different things, and some will work, and some will not. And we'll move on to the next thing, and move on to the next thing. So, and this, as we were talking about it before, having a very, very good vision. Okay, this is what we are working towards. And today we may not be able to imagine how we could ever get there, right? But we have this vision. And what we really need to focus on is really what the steps are. And the steps may be what we're going to do in this year, what we're going to do in this quarter. What are we going to focus on of all of the activities that we have going on? And then, okay, just let's focus on what we're going to get done this week. Sometimes within our teams as well, that's what we think about. Okay, this is where we know that we're going. Okay, we think it's great.
Yeah.
We have what that vision is. But if we're only focusing on this, then we're never going to be able to get there. So how do we bring that back into digestible pieces, not only from a technology perspective, but how we're building, how we're communicating, who are we working with, right? Who are the like-minded people who have the same approach and the same long-term view that we want to build with? And what's also fascinating about this space is there's not a single person who not only or organization who not only knows exactly what it will be,
Yeah.
but nobody's working on it alone, you know? So you see companies, big and small, you see industries, you see countries, you see communities starting to work together because it's such a collective opportunity and a collective challenge, So it just really brings very, very different views together. So it's fascinating. It's fascinating. It's exciting. Some days you think, wow, deep breath, deep breath.
Yeah.
So, and there's not a dull moment. I think there's not a dull moment for anyone who's working in it and working on it. So
I'm going to ask you one question, Balkiz, as we wrap up. We're in the, both of us are in the aviation and aerospace sector, right? And I think the number in terms of gender diversity, there is not a very great ratio of women working in this industry, right? And definitely fewer rising to very big leadership roles. There are a few. Definitely, it's increasing. It's great to see some of the recent announcements. But what do you think we should be doing? One, to have more women coming into the workforce, but then also enabling their growth into leadership roles. Are there any best practices you've seen for yourself in the companies you've worked with? Any ideas?
um, if I think back on what we've talked about today, it's also telling our story. I mean, it's what you're doing right here, right? So it's giving a medium and a way to have really honest conversations and to see, and to share not only amongst ourselves, but when we think of the next generation or different people coming into the industry, perhaps even from different industries, to share our story, right? To see, okay, what is possible? What is a different career path and something that is quite, historically traditional and, starts to become less and less so. So I think this is more of a community effect. And then on the individual piece, you know, people always talk about inclusivity, which is really, really important. But
Yeah.
this is not the responsibility of an organization. This is not about diversity programs or quotas or anything like that. It comes down to the individual to say, what can I do to be more specifically inclusive, right? So what actions am I taking that is making things more inclusive? So how am I helping other people around me? How am I supporting them? How am I pulling them into the conversation, into the activity, into whatever the project that could really help them as well. So I think this is something that we can do every day, and it's something little that we can do, and this is completely within our own power. So you know look around us. We should all look around us and think of the great moment that there's been, and all of us are fortunate. And there's been many in our careers where somebody said, either tapped you on the shoulder or pulled you along to say, okay, come with me, and
Yeah.
let's do this, or this is where you should go, and think about this. So we should be doing this always in reverse as well, right? So
Yeah.
this is a little small individual thing I think that we can do with a really, really big impact.
Yeah, that's true. I think you're very right about it being starting from the individual level. I think we're doing some good work in the company that I work as well. Just having sessions around trying to understand what biases are, what
Mm,
inclusion really means. Because a lot of time I think people just say, "Hey, I'm not biased," or I am a very inclusive person," but it's very hard to actually know what it means till you hear people's experiences. If, hey, somebody told me,
mm,
but they didn't really think about where I was coming from, or somebody assumed I didn't want to do this job, or that I couldn't make this trip because of a certain reason. So just kind
yeah.
of being aware, and like you said, it starts with the person and starts with those one-to-one connections, deeper connections as well.
Mm. And you talk about bias, and we talked about this a lot. I think organizations and individuals and societies are becoming very aware to it, and so much of it is, in fact, unconscious. It's not coming from, any negative place. It's just a way sometimes that our minds, because we're so overloaded with information, it's just a way for our minds to process things, at the speed and the volume at which we need to. So, and it becomes unconscious. But when you step back, as you said, to say, okay, wait a minute, why am I thinking like this? What's the source of this? And is it leading me to a conclusion which is actually completely false, because the place where I've started from is false.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, absolutely. Balkis, I've enjoyed listening to your career journey, and along with that, obviously, it's your personal journey as well. Thank you so much for sharing it with us, and I'm very excited for whatever next step you have in your career. I'm looking forward to seeing how the urban air mobility program is going to grow as well, and your team
me
along with
too.
And thanks so much for your time, and for being open to sharing your story with us.
No, and Sanila, thank you. Really, it's an incredible initiative. And when you first told me about it, it was an absolute yes. And
Yeah.
bravo, and a huge, huge thank you to you for doing something like this. Really, really impactful. So very, very happy, and very humbled to be part of it. So thank you for the invite.
Thank you.